So, Bob, obviously the stakes are very high for Intel, which has been struggling. As the last American company to build and design its own chips, a lot of people are looking to the new CEO, Lip-Bu Tan, to turn things around. Some are viewing his leadership as Intel's last chance, or at least Intel as we know it. You were there at his speech. What were your key takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, there were no major surprises. I mean, basically, Lip Pu explained his history and his background to sort of for a lot of people who didn't know who he was. That kind of gives him the justification for getting this role. And then he talked about how, dedicated he is to Intel. The reason he took the job is because he loves the company and he really wants to do some important things. And so it's about doubling down on the areas where they have strength. That includes the client PC, so CPUs for PCs, the data center, and the foundry. I mean, these are all things that his predecessor Pat Gelsinger was also working on. But I think there's a sense of renewed focus here, and he recognizes that there's some areas that he's going to have to trim the fat on. It's a big company, 110,000 people. And yet he also wants to innovate in new areas. And he talked about a couple of different things, including AI, of course, specifically. And he talked about robotics as an area he's very interested in.
Well, on that AI point, let's actually listen to a little bit of what Tan said about it.
In the broader AI data area, I'm not happy with our current position. I know that you are not happy either. We are going to learn to write the lesson from the past mistakes and working towards a competitive system that we can provide you.
So that's a pretty candid admission there from Tan. What did you make of it?
Well, look, I mean, he's just saying what we all kind of know, which is that Intel has not been a big player in AI. I mean, NVIDIA completely dominates. Now, I don't think he feels like he needs to directly compete with NVIDIA right away. And I think no one would expect that to be a very good strategy because that would be very challenging. I think what he wants to try and do is find opportunities where Intel can do very well. One of the things he made a big deal about was to say, hey, we need to start out with the workloads and the software, figure out what the software is that we need and the workloads are that are happening, and then design the chips accordingly. So that's a very different approach than sort of starting with the hardware, which I think Intel typically, and frankly, a lot of other chip companies have typically done.
Well, what about the political side of things? In a press release after Tan's speech, Intel specifically names rising tensions between Taiwan and China as a risk. And that's as TSMC breaks records with its 165 billion US dollar investment in the United States. Now, Tan also hinted at talks with the Trump administration, which has been pushing to bring manufacturing back to the United States. So, how is Intel fitting itself into this conversation?
Well, look, there is no question in my mind that Intel is absolutely essential and critical to US-based manufacturing. Intel, and specifically Intel's foundry business, is too important to fail. And yes, TSMC is investing a lot of money in the US in factories, but the actual design and all the critical work that they're doing is still based in Taiwan. There needs to be a company here in the US that can do advanced manufacturing. And look, Micron is here. They build memory. Samsung has got factories here as well, but Intel is the one company that can do the advanced logic side of the semiconductor equation. And they are an absolutely essential part of it. And even before the geopolitical tensions, it was clear to those industry observers like myself that you had to have a strong US player. Now, with those tensions growing even higher between Taiwan and China, there's absolutely zero question. That doesn't mean TSMC doesn't play an incredibly important role. They clearly will. But there also needs to be other players, and also from a geographic perspective. And chips are essential to the modern economy. So you've got to have as much diversity as you possibly can. And that's why Intel is so important.